Play Geek History Lesson.
I am unable to complete your command.
And why not?
Said podcast, Geek History Lesson, is not recommended for Agent Peggy Carter because of your delicate lady sensibilities.
Well, I'm going to override that because I simply must listen to this week's Geek History Lesson on Edwin Jarvis.
Did you say Jarvis? Jarvis? Malfunction, self-fulfilling paradox, must exterminate Peggy Carter.
Oh, bollocks, and I really wanted to listen to this week's Geek History Lesson. Hello and welcome to Geek History Lesson. I'm Ashley Victoria Robinson.
And I'm Jason, not an artificial intelligence Inman. Welcome to your mind university. This is the podcast called Geek History Lesson, where we teach you about things of pop culture and characters that you must know. I am making that voice because today we are talking about a person who, because of certain Marvel movies, has become known as an artificial intelligence. But what you don't know is that this person, at one time, was a real person, was a man with a paunch and a bald spot and a very awesome derby hat. And I'm talking
Don't give it all away.
And I'm talking about Edwin Jarvis.
That is correct.
Why are we talking about Edwin Jarvis?
We are talking about Edwin Jarvis because he has appeared in 2 different iterations in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and because he is played by the sexy most, James D'Arcy, on Agent Carter right now.
Yeah, Agent Carter Season 2 is back. And Edwin Jarvis is a good part of that. So, we thought, let's dive deep into the comic books and tell you about the Marvel comic version of Edwin Jarvis.
Because he is, frankly, nothing like we have seen anywhere in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Quite different. We have not seen what I would call the real Jarvis.
I would not. I would say that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's definitely the truth.
Okay.
So why don't we jump right into the 10-cent origin?
Yes, the first section of our podcast where we give you the Cliff Notes version of the complete origin of Edwin Jarvis, in case you ever go to a Marvel-themed cocktail party and someone's like, perchance, my dear lad over there, do you knoweth of this Edwin Jarvis?
Because apparently Thor is also going to be at this cocktail party.
I say thee.
Edwin Jarvis is, of course, a Marvel Comics character who first appeared in Tales of Suspense.
Tales of Suspense.
Number 59.
Number 59.
From November of 1964.
I'm not going to do that one.
He was created by Stan Lee and Don Heck. His team affiliations include Iron Man, Avengers, Peggy Carter, and Spider-Man. His abilities are he's trained in unarmed combat, and he has been famously portrayed by Paul Bettany and James D'Arcy in the Marvel movies and TV shows.
Yay!
And that's probably our shortest 10-cent origin to date.
Very well done. Very clean, like a butler would leave it.
It's what you get when you don't do a super.
Yes. Let's move on into our next section of our podcast called the Meet Cute, which is a term that we stole from romantic comedies, where we talk about where we first encountered this character. Ashley
Jason
Robinson, where did you first encounter Edwin Jarvis?
So here's the thing. The first Marvel movie in the phase 1 of the cinematic universe that I saw was Hulk. I didn't see Iron Man.
You mean Incredible Hulk?
Incredible Hulk.
Yeah.
I didn't see Iron Man or Iron Man 2 until after I saw the Avengers.
Okay.
So the first place that I ever heard of Edwin Jarvis was in the Avengers movie. When I saw it on screen. Because I'm sure I'd read about him in the comics before because I'd read things like Civil War before, but this was the first time that I ever really remember actually him sticking around. Like he was ever memorable to me was when I saw the Avengers movie in the summer of 2012.
Oh, wow.
So
But you don't remember anywhere in the comic books?
I mean, no, like I said, I know he'd been there, but none of it ever stuck with me because, I mean, Jarvis as a butler is very much a I'm kind of hanging out, set dressing type character.
Sure.
Except in very specific events that we're about to talk about.
Okay, cool.
So where did you first meet him?
I first encountered Jarvis in the Heroes Return Avengers run. This is written by Kurt Busiek, drawn by George Perez. And if you listen to this podcast before, you know Kurt Busiek is one of my favorite writers. He wrote what I consider to be the definite Avengers run in the 90s. And Edwin Jarvis appears in Avengers #1 of that volume. And there's a very special scene in it where he gives this hero called D-Man. Now, if you don't know who D-Man is this Marvel character who wears yellow and red and sort of has a costume like Wolverine, but he's a homeless bum.
Cool.
And he used to be an Avenger. And Avengers #1 in this volume is all about the Avengers. Every Avenger everywhere got attacked. So D-Man got attacked as well. And so they all had a meeting in the mansion. And Captain America's like, well, we're going to form a team so we can go punch this thing in the face. And some of the heroes, like Spider-Man's like, I got to take care of Mary Jane. They're like, okay, you're excused. And D-Man's like, I need food. And so he leaves. And there's a very special scene where Edwin Jarvis gives him 2 bags of groceries out of Avengers Mansion and lets him take them home. And one of the other heroes, I think it might be Quicksilver, like makes fun of like, oh man, how much he stank and da-da-da-da-da. And Edwin Jarvis defends D-Man and says like, oh, he's one of the fiercest and proudest Avengers members I've ever seen.
Wow.
And that's the first time I remember like being conscious of like, oh, Jarvis.
Yeah. That's really nice, actually.
Yeah, it's really nice. But to be honest with you, my favorite version of Jarvis is the ultimate version of Jarvis, which is not the computer. It's still
we will talk about that.
It's still the butler. And are you going to reveal what happens to Ultimate Jarvis?
I think so.
Okay, then I'll stay away from it. But I do love how there's a funny gag, and I don't remember in which volume of Ultimates it is, but Jarvis mentions that he has to go to a poker game with him and his buddy Alfred.
Yes. That's a great lead up to our History 101.
So there you go. And that's my meet cute for Alfred. But let's go right into, as you said, Professor Ashley, the History 101, the main meat of our lesson, where you, as our teacher, our confidant, our attaché, is going to lead us through the history of Edwin Jarvis.
That is true. So let's start with a fun fact.
Fun fact.
Alfred Pennyworth, Batman's butler, had a father.
Wait, whoa. Hey, hold on.
Yeah.
We're in the Marvel universe. Why are you talking about DC?
Well, you'll see in just a second.
Okay, I was just about to get angry. So internet angry.
Please don't tweet me.
Okay.
Alfred Pennyworth had a father, as people tend to do. His father's name was Jarvis.
Uh-oh.
So
what?
There's a pretty good chance that Marvel stole that name from DC.
Okay.
When they were coming up with a name for Tony Stark's butler. That's never been
Now, Alfred
confirmed.
appeared first?
Alfred appeared way first.
Now, did Alfred's father appear first, though?
That I cannot tell you, because this is not an Alfred Pennyworth podcast.
What?
This is an Edwin Jarvis podcast.
Well, as you continue us down, I'm going to do a strange adventure through Google.
Cool, because I actually searched for this in several different sources, and I could not find the first mention of Alfred Pennyworth's father. But it's kind of become this possibly anachronistic story that they stole the name, or that maybe DC stole it from Marvel to, but either way, he's definitely tied to Alfred Pennyworth through name only.
Got it.
So Edwin Jarvis was born to a modest family, and in several different publications and several different kind of origin stories of Edwin Jarvis, it's like, it says modest family, but you never like meet his family or like learn anything about them.
He just talks about them.
It probably means that they were, working class, people.
Got it.
English people. He was drafted into the RAF during the Second World War because... Just like Alfred, because he was a champion boxer for the 3 previous years in his town. And so he later received... because of that, he does a lot of hand-to-hand training like we talked about in the 10 Cent Origin. He later goes on to receive updated military combat training from Captain America in a couple different stories. So basically, Jarvis's only offensive mechanism is that he's good with his hands.
Oh.
So following World War II, because as we all know, it eventually ends, Jarvis immigrates to the United States.
Yay!
And he becomes the, quote, manservant, end quote, to Howard and Maria Stark. And he watched over the Stark mansion following their death because Tony was but a little child and couldn't.
Oh.
So... because I thought that this seemed really rushed when I was doing my research, I actually went and read the first appearance of Jarvis.
Okay.
Which, like I said, is Tales of Suspense number 59.
I've never read it.
It's on the Marvel Unlimited app if anyone wants to get it.
Okay.
And so that issue is basically like a dual story. There's an Iron Man story and a Captain America story.
Well, that Tales of Suspense was kind of one of the Marvel's team-up books.
Mm-hmm. And, you would think that he'd be in the Iron Man story, but he's totally not. He's in a single panel of the Captain America story.
Interesting.
Because he's kidnapped, because he's Tony's butler / manservant, and then Captain America, happens to save him.
Okay.
And you learn absolutely nothing about him in that first appearance.
Awesome.
So I got no clarity on this from that first issue. It's a really... They're not bad stories. The Iron Man story opens with him fighting a man-eating shark and then taking it down to the deepest depths so it can't hurt anyone anymore, and that's pretty funny. Jarvis goes on to be instrumental in raising Tony Stark and shaping him into the man that he could be. He is also arguably...
The Iron Man?
Yes, depending on the version of the origin that you're reading, he is usually the first person to know that Tony Stark is Iron Man.
Yep.
Although in kind of like recent iterations, sometimes Pepper figures it out before him. But I think it's more meaningful if it's Jarvis. So...
Yeah, I think this is probably your leanings of Alfred and Batman. That's the reason why you want to go for that.
Well, and because, I mean, like the father-son relationship, too. So when Tony Stark eventually donates Stark Mansion to serve the Avengers, it becomes known as the Avengers Mansion. As we know it today, there's a couple different stories where it goes back to be known as Stark Mansion, but it's basically, we will pretty much exclusively refer to it as Avengers Mansion from here on out.
Yes, got it.
Got it.
Let it be written, let it be done.
So it is written, so it shall be done. Jarvis also switched over from working exclusively for Tony to working for the Avengers in basically the same capacity. He becomes everybody's manservant.
Yeah.
Instead of just Tony's manservant.
I remember there's a lot of stories where like Jarvis will just ask Thor if he wants a meal.
Yeah,
like
and he like cleans their costumes and stuff.
Yeah, come on.
It's a little bit indentured servitude.
A little bit, yeah.
So he soon becomes accustomed to waiting on the Avengers and their guests hand and foot, and this apparently makes him happy because it's like the 70s, and, you know, the help likes being the help, I guess.
Well, even in the 90s, in the Kurt Busiek run, he talks about how... And I've seen conversation. It's tough not to talk about Alfred. By the way, through my Google searches, I could not find who came first. The only first mention of Jarvis Pennyworth, Alfred's father, I could tell about was after the Crisis. So maybe Jarvis Pennyworth was sort of a wink back to Jarvis.
Maybe.
We're not certain who came first, Jarvis Pennyworth or Jarvis.
But
Alfred did come first.
Alfred did come first. This character is a carbon copy of Alfred, so maybe...
We will say that this character's appearance as bald and kind of dumpy...
Portly, yeah.
Was what Alfred first looked like when he appeared.
Yes, and then he got kind of a remake later on.
And then they changed him into the thin with the real mustache. Anyways, it's tough to not talk about a butler for a billionaire, which is what Alfred is, which is what Jarvis is. It's tough not to compare the two. But I remember Alfred saying this several times in the comic books, and Jarvis also saying this in the Kurt Busiek run, that he felt it was an honor that the heroes do such important work that as long as he could help some little bit, it made a difference.
Yeah, that he is serving the people who serve the world.
And what a great honor.
But it is a little bit weird, when he like brings Spider-Man a bowl of cereal. You're just like, okay, I guess.
Peter Parker's the poor superhero, man.
I know. And he's the one who probably needs the most help. You're right. Except D-Man.
Except D-Man.
Jarvis is also the only person to be with the Avengers through their entire existence. He has never left the Avengers. Even Captain America and Iron Man have left the team for several times for a variety of reasons. Jarvis has never left, except he does tender his resignation during Tony's battle with alcoholism, but he returns in the next issue approximately 6 hours later, so he doesn't really leave the team.
I'm done, sir. I'm back, sir. You know,
basically, he's like, I'm done, sir. And Tony's what are you talking about?
He walks out the front door. He just walks around the building and comes back in the back.
Yeah, he kind of leaves during the Demon in the Bottle storyline as impetus for forcing Tony to look at himself and kind of get over it.
Sober up, you playboy.
Yeah. But I think that's really interesting that he's outlasted even his original boss as a member of the Avengers. He also has the distinction of being Franklin Richards' primary babysitter. Franklin Richards, as you should know, if not, go back and listen to the Fantastic Four episode, is the super-powered genius baby son of...
He's not a genius.
Well, but he's super smart.
No, well,
they're all super smart.
Valeria's super smart. Their daughter. Franklin's super powered.
Yeah, but Franklin's not a dummy.
No, true. But Valeria is way smarter.
Yeah. But so it's this big distinction too that Jarvis, in addition to caring for all the adults, cares for the kids. So he's the one because the Richardses are living in Avengers Mansion at the time, so he looks after Franklin, and then he also looked after a character named Silverclaw, who eventually became an Avenger, and she comes to regard him as her uncle.
Yes, and Silverclaw... Wow, we've jumped way ahead.
Well, this is just...
Oh, okay, got it.
You know.
Because Silverclaw is a Kurt Busiek, George Perez character.
Yes.
Yes, because actually that's a great issue, because that issue is about Jarvis is at the airport trying to pick somebody up. He's trying to pick up one of these children who he helped support in South America. You know, like you see those commercials and they're like, give $1 a month and write letters. Well, he did that for this little girl.
Yep.
And he's at the airport and the plane is attacked by this villain. I think Moses Magnum is his name.
I think you're right.
And the Avengers show up and Jarvis is there and Jarvis is like, oh, I can't find the girl. And the Avengers are like, oh, crap, we got to help. And during the commotion, there was this superhero named Silverclaw, which she basically had silver skin, looked like a cat, and she helped the Avengers.
Yeah, she looks like Silver Wolverine.
Sort of, yeah. And at the very end, she depowered and learned that Jarvis was her uncle. And at the time, it was kind of funny because Jarvis, for some reason, was expecting to see the little girl and hadn't thought about that, oh, she grew up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she's like a teenager when this happens.
Yes.
And she also does go on to become a reserve member of the Avengers. So
totally.
She kind of shows up here and again, but she got there through Jarvis. The reason that right now, too, that we're kind of talking more about his characteristics and generally what makes him a person
than a history
is because especially during the Silver Age and the Bronze Age, Jarvis was like literally set dressing.
Yeah.
Starting in about like the 80s onward, you get to see more of him in action. So I just thought it was more interesting than being like, and he stood in the background while Tony did this. That we would talk about what made him these pieces of his character that we learn throughout these stories.
Cool.
Even jumping forward to the 90s.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. So being a card-carrying member of the Avenger means that Jarvis also spends a lot of this period coming under attack by their crazy foes.
What?
Yeah.
Like the Masters of Evil?
Yeah. It normally results, in him being bound and gagged. And then like Iron Man or Captain America has to come and save him. Like he's always being hogtied.
Yeah.
So he's doing your laundry one minute and then he's tied up on the kitchen floor the next.
I mean, it's the problem when your superhero mansion headquarters is like in Manhattan.
Yeah, it's in like Central Park.
And is a public address. I mean, it's the same as the Fantastic Four. Like, it's always one of those things where it's just like, there's always been that running joke to where how much would you hate it to be in one of the office buildings or rent in the apartment building next to the Baxter building, the Fantastic Four.
Because it's always getting exploded.
Because it's always being attacked. And it would be the same for Avengers Mansion. You'd be just like, oh my God, again? Mm-hmm. Like, you'd have to stay away from the windows all the time.
I mean, why would you build windows after a certain point? It's just like Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters. Why they got all those windows?
Yeah, that's true. But at least the Xavier School for the Gifted Youngsters is
out in the middle of nowhere.
In the middle of nowhere and it is on a big estate.
Yes.
So like they have like miles to separate them from the other house. Whereas like Avengers Mansion is literally a block, less than a block, and there's the next building.
Yes. So one of his duties in his capacity as manservant to the Avengers. Butler to the Avengers.
Not manservant.
They actually he's the manservant until like the 70s they changed it to Butler.
Oh, really?
He is their man, like that's why I said quote at the beginning. That is out of the comics. He's the manservant.
Okay, cool.
One of his jobs is that he's in charge of a lot of the weird like mystical items and trophies and stuff that they bring back. And there's a pretty important story during this like golden age or silver age, that involves the casket of ancient winters.
I know what that is.
I was just going to ask Jason Inman, do you know what that is?
The casket of ancient winters is a very famous Asgardian weapon from the Frost Giants. It actually is it's not quite in the very first Thor movie. When the Frost Giants, there's that ice weapon that the head of the Frost Giants has, and Odin keeps secret in that movie.
Laufey,
Laufey, thank you. Laufey, played by Colm Feore. Yes. That weapon is sort of supposed to be the casket of icy winters. They do a better job of it on Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes when they actually show it to you, and it's like this thing that if you open it, it's sort of like Pandora's box for winter.
Yes, because it contains Fimble Winter of Yrnir, which creates massive snowstorms when it is open.
It's just like you open it and it's going to be like the worst blizzard you've ever seen.
So some of the reasons that Jarvis will often get captured and hogtied is because people want the casket of ancient winters.
Specifically that thing?
Yes. It happens like 6 times.
A lot of these villains love winter.
So, I mean, I guess like if you're trying to take over Brazil, it's probably a really good weapon. What is happening?
I mean, I'd be like, give me the bazooka of eternal torment.
No, nobody wants that. I wish that was a thing.
Let's make it.
Yeah. So in the 80s, Jarvis starts to be able to help out on some of the more like rescue or reconnaissance type missions.
What does he do?
Well, most famously, I couldn't find the issue that this happens in, but I found several like reports about these events happening.
Got it.
There is a stalled subway car underneath New York City.
Okay.
And it is stalled because there's a citywide disaster involving a demonically possessed car driving around on top. So they like stall this subway car, and it's Jarvis's job while the Avengers are fighting the demonically possessed car to go and get everyone out of the subway.
Okay. Here's my problem with this. Jarvis is early 50s.
Yeah.
Okay. He's supposed to be the same age as Tony's parents, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, he's definitely in his 50s then.
If not pushing 60.
Okay, if not pushing 60. He's overweight.
Yeah.
And has no combat training.
No, he has combat training.
Oh, he had the Russian air. Okay, okay. Got it. My bad. I'm sorry, Jarvis
but I mean,
lovers.
it is probably out of date. And he's probably not very strong.
So why? Why do you send this guy in there?
Because the panels that I found in the articles that talked about this, it's mostly him like opening the door and kind of ushering people out politely.
I'm going to say this right now. Once we get to the end of this lesson, if we don't have a discussion of who could win in a fight, Alfred or Jarvis, we're doing it wrong.
Just you wait.
We're doing it wrong.
Just you wait, because we all know the answer.
I think we do.
So now we get to the first time where I'm going to give you a date. In 1989, there was a little event called Acts of Vengeance. Do you know what Acts of Vengeance is?
No.
Acts of Vengeance is, of course, a company-wide crossover that focuses on a wide array of supervillains facing down heroes that they weren't normally teamed up with.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, cool. So let's put Loki against Captain America.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
Nothing comes out of it, but that's what happens. It's just a bunch of kind of one-offs that cross a bunch of different titles. And Jarvis kind of did his first real act of heroing.
Who was his villain?
Dr. Doom.
Holy, what? Wait a minute here. What? Okay, they were like, let's go for the bottom of the pile with the heroes. Let's put them against Dr. Doom. Yeah, that works.
Well, here's what he did.
Did they put Galactus versus Aunt May?
I don't know, but I'm going to go ahead and say yes.
Okay.
So he successfully defended a floating hydro base against an army of Dr. Doom's robots led by Dr. Doom.
How? How did he do this? With wonder and merriment?
With an umbrella,
with a
cup of tea, and his British wit.
and a plates of small sandwiches. Like, Doom storms the castle, and he's like, oh, this ham and cheese, it is so good. Back to Latveria.
Now, sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave.
Very well, only because your delicious sandwiches have warmed my hellish heart.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to say that's exactly how it went.
Okay.
He also...
Jarvis.
Okay.
Jarvis versus Dr. Doom. Oh my God. Oh man, that's amazing. I want to see that in a movie.
Well, you could.
Yeah, I guess.
We have two Jarvises.
Oh man. James Darcy versus a Dr. Doom. Holy God.
He also, not long after that, defended Avengers Mansion against an incarnation of the Masters of Evil.
I know about that story.
And was brutally beaten by Mr. Hyde for his efforts, while Captain America was tied to a chair and forced to watch. Mm-hmm. Following this attack...
But he never gave up.
And that's what Captain America kind of takes from
Did I just ruin your lesson? I'm sorry.
No.
Yeah, that's a very important storyline. I've actually, that storyline was mentioned a lot in a lot of the Wizard magazines that I used to read back in the day.
Oh, really?
As like why to not treat Jarvis as just the butler. Mm-hmm. Because apparently I've never read the issue, but from what I've understood, he never... They were trying to get a secret out of him, and he never told it.
Yes. And following this attack, Jarvis wears an eye patch for several issues during his recovery, and it's
his Nick Fury hero worship face.
Exactly. And it's supposed to be really hard for Steve to look at him because he couldn't do anything.
No, Steve. Well, okay. Here's the thing. So this is where Steve has a problem. But the Avengers didn't give a damn when he was facing off Dr. Doom by himself.
No one beat him up that time.
I guess.
It was all okay.
All right.
We don't like to talk about that.
We don't talk about the sandwich incident.
That's very true.
By the way, you might know Dr. Doom loves lemon cakes.
Sweet.
So good.
Nailed it.
All right.
In Avengers number 400, the landmark issue, Jarvis goes to face off against Loki.
What the hell are they doing?
Because he's the only one who realizes that a Loki has snuck inside Avengers Mansion, so he goes and politely asks him to leave.
Excuse me, Mr. Loki.
What?
Would you mind leaving? You do
kneel before me.
No, I just cleaned this floor.
Kneel.
I just told you, I just waxed this floor, sir. You don't live here.
My brother does.
Yes, but I believe he has you on the no guest list.
No, I'm here for a sleepover.
No, I don't believe so. I'm going to have to ask you to leave before
I'm going to poke you with my Loki pokey stick.
Listen, I have this plate of lemon cakes.
Ooh.
Please have one. They're quite delicious. Go ahead. Now, you can come back tomorrow and talk to Thor when he's here, but I'm going to have to ask you to leave right now.
Can I take the rest of the lemon cakes?
Of course, sir.
And then he runs off. I don't know how to make that sound with my face.
With the runoff?
Yeah.
You
didn't make that with your face.
No, that's true.
I was trying to think of like a sound effect I could do.
I don't even know if on the podcast if they even heard me beating on the table.
Well, let us know in the comment section below.
I made footsteps.
So we're all the way up now to the foundation of the new Avengers.
Whoa, we skipped 10 years.
I know.
Holy
because
God.
this is the thing about Jarvis is around for everything.
Yep.
But he only has very specific moments of impact.
And we just jumped over him and Silverclaw and that stuff. So,
yes, because we mentioned that earlier, talking about his character.
Cool. All right, so now we're at the New Avengers. Brian Michael Bendis.
It's 2005.
Got it.
If you need a time frame reference.
I do. Thank you.
You're welcome. Jarvis was called back from the first holiday he had ever taken.
Ooh, where'd he go?
A beach.
Okay, cool.
An inconclusive
Maybe
beach.
Tahiti?
I'm going to say so. It's a beautiful place.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Because, quote, his special services were once again needed.
Oh, those lemon cakes.
Yes, always 11 cakes. When he comes back, he meets Wolverine, and he's like, what are you doing here? And Wolverine's like, I'm making the new Avengers, and you're an Avenger, so now you're a new Avenger. Duh, bub. And this leads to...
Duh, bub.
Yeah, that's how Wolverine talks. I'm Canadian, Wolverine's Canadian. I would know.
Okay, I give it to you.
Okay.
On those credentials, I accept this into evidence.
So this, Wolverine being a part of the New Avengers, Jarvis being a part of the New Avengers, leads to their frequent confrontations over Wolverine's behavior and etiquette, because Jarvis basically thinks he's a savage.
Okay.
And doesn't like that he picks his teeth and wears wife beaters and drinks beer. And he's always very politely trying to get Logan to grow up a little bit and wipe his face and wash behind his ears,
Okay.
So the very next year in 2006, there's this little event that's going to become a big event this year called Civil War. By Mark Miller and Brian Hitch.
Yep. No, not Brian Hitch. Steve McNiven.
Oh, Steve McNiven.
Brian Hitch did the Ultimates with Mark Miller.
I'm sorry, Steve McNiven.
There you go.
During Civil War, Aunt May moves into Stark Tower, because now it's Stark Tower instead of Avengers Mansion.
Well, we skipped ahead. Right before New Avengers, there was this event called Avengers Disassembled.
Yes.
And Avengers Mansion was blown up.
Yes.
And Tony built Avengers Tower.
Yes. Kind of like what we see in the movies.
Basically, exactly what we see in the movies.
So Aunt May moves in there with Mary Jane and Peter Parker after their home burns down, and Jarvis strikes up a relationship with her because she's a nice older lady and he's a nice older man, and they both like cleaning, so why not? Mm-hmm. However, when Spider-Man switches sides halfway through Civil War
and joins, Civil War, just in case you don't know, is basically Captain America versus Iron Man, and the government's like, all superheroes must get driver's licenses of superheroing.
Yeah.
And Captain America's like, no, and Iron Man's like, yes, and then they fight.
And at first, Spider-Man's like, yes, and then halfway through, he's like, no. So they all flee Stark Tower.
Yep, they have to leave.
They have to take Aunt May with them, and so her relationship with Jarvis basically comes to an abrupt end, I left. Goodbye. It's over.
Is that all you're going to talk about the Aunt May Jarvis?
No, I'm going to talk about New Avengers Civil War, and then I'm going to talk about One More Day.
Okay. We'll see. There's another piece of Aunt May Jarvis, but I'll see if you mention it, Professor.
Oh, now I'm under the gun. Yep. So during the Civil War, of course, was its own event, but there were all these tie-in issues. So during the Civil War New Avengers title, Jarvis is shot by a Stark Industries employee who is opposed to Tony Stark's position and the technology that he was using to reinforce the Superhero Registration Act.
Yep.
And this is, to date, the most egregious act of violence taken out against Jarvis.
Mm-hmm.
He survives. So by the time Civil War, the Initiative comes around. Do you want to explain that real quick?
Well, Civil War ends. Mm-hmm. Captain America loses.
Yes.
And what Iron Man and Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four, what they came up with was this thing called the 50-State Initiative. Mm-hmm. The simple fact that every state should have a superhero team. They shouldn't all be based in New York, which I kind of agree with. And they opened this academy called Camp Hammond to train the heroes to take them to teams and stuff like that. And it's called The Initiative. And there's a title actually called Avengers The Initiative. By the way, if you've never read that title, it's great.
Yes. It's all on the Marvel Unlimited app.
Yep.
So by the time the Initiative happens, Jarvis has fully recovered from his gunshot wound, and he's working in Avengers Mansion again, like Dustin and stuff. He, however, does threaten Tony Stark that, quote, if that Tigra, expletive word that's all beeped out, is allowed to join the new Avengers again, that he'll need to find somebody else to do his laundry. Oh. Because Tigra was
she's a cat lady.
Yes, and she was very much involved with Tony Stark during Civil War, and so Jarvis kind of blames her for what happened and what happened to him.
Okay.
So because it's one of their biggest fights is over whether or not she's allowed to continue being an Avenger.
Interesting. Okay.
And Tony acquiesces and kicks her off the team.
Nice.
Because Jarvis is always right. Jarvis's relationship with Aunt May is briefly revisited in the One More Day storyline when Tony gives Jarvis $2 million to give to May to pay for her hospital bills. Mm-hmm. He goes to her bedside. He breaks down and cries there. And then following the giant Spider-Man reset, their relationship is retconned out of existence.
Yes.
And never happened and never shall happen, which I think is a little bit unfortunate. They always do these things where they set Aunt May up to like have somebody else, but I guess because it will always be Ben, like it never works out really.
Actually, Aunt May in current Spider-Man comic books is married.
Yeah, for the moment.
She's been married for like 4 years now.
I just find that it never lasts.
Oh, well, she's married to J. Jonah Jameson's father.
I know. I actually really like that.
I think it's really cool.
But I thought her and Jarvis were like very sweet together.
Yes, and that's the moment that I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad you brought it up.
Thank you.
Because I think Jarvis crying at her bedside is interesting. I also think Jarvis and Aunt May having a relationship is, I think it's smart writing.
Well, because they're serving the same position to
their heroes,
yeah,
and they're the same age, mm-hmm. and they would have they would have such similar experiences.
They're also from, I mean, not to like get super political or whatever, but they're both from the same kind of economic class of people, like they're working class people.
Sure, and also, Jarvis makes lemon cakes, Aunt May makes wheat cakes.
Does she?
Yeah.
Is that a specific thing?
Yes, that's the wheat cakes for Peter. Yeah.
So,
wheat cakes.
Great.
Lemon cakes. Look it up.
Now I'm going to show recipes.
Go get those recipes.
In the Secret Invasion storyline, yep. Secret Invasion is where it's revealed that a bunch of characters have actually secretly been Skrulls this whole time.
Yep, the Skrulls are invading Earth.
Yep. It is revealed that Jarvis has actually, been replaced by a Skrull.
What?
Yeah.
So we've been eating Skrull lemon cakes?
Ew, gross. What are even in those?
Mayonnaise.
So despite this revelation, it has never since then been made clear exactly when Jarvis was taken and when he was replaced with a Skrull imposter, because with characters like Jessica Drew's Spider-Woman and who have been replaced in the past. Mockingbird, you can go back and they will have retconned, usually in like whatever their next storyline is, when exactly this happened. Mm-hmm. But they don't do it here. They're just like, he was a Skrull once, and then once he wasn't a Skrull, and now he's not a Skrull again.
But we don't know. Yeah, we don't know exactly when the change was.
Yeah,
made.
Nobody was like, it was right. Because
they did the same thing for Hank Pym, because Hank Pym was revealed as a Skrull, and then you found out that right before Civil War, I believe, is when he was changed. Yeah.
Which is weird, because then it makes you go back and look at those
comics
stories really differently, knowing that the person who wrote it didn't know that they were supposed to be a Skrull.
Well, the actual thing about it, I will say, is that if it was Bendis. It was Brian Michael Bendis who did Avengers Disassembled and Secret Invasion. He actually knew because he said for a long time that Secret Invasion, when he wrote New Avengers #1, and I think Secret Invasion takes place in like the 40s or 50s of those issues. I could be completely wrong, but it's a ways down the road. That was like the first storyline that he pitched. And he wanted
interesting.
And he wanted it to happen in like a New Avengers like 25, but then they came up with the idea for Civil War, so they pushed it back. They came up with the idea for Planet Hulk, they pushed it back.
Yeah.
They kept like pushing back this stuff, and then that's when they decided to use Secret Invasion as like, oh, Secret Invasion is going to be sort of the storyline that almost brings us all together again.
So, Skrull Jarvis, we're going to talk about him for a minute.
Yep.
He uses a virus to infiltrate Stark Enterprise's computer system, disable it, and disable several Iron Man suits during this time.
And it disables Tony's current Iron Man suit that he's wearing, and he skyrockets and crash lands.
Yeah, it's pretty dramatic.
Yeah. I like Secret Invasion. I think it's a great story. Actually.
I do too. I didn't mean to seem like we were down on it.
No. I just wanted to say that.
But there are some things where you're like, oh, this is a little bit confusing. Like when you look back in the past. Skrull Jarvis also obtains Tony Stark's record on Sentry. And
the Sentry.
Oh, Sentry is yeah.
Do you know who the Sentry is?
The Sentry, nope.
You don't know who the Sentry is?
I mean, I know he's a hero, but I didn't read anything about him.
The Sentry is a character created by Paul Jenkins in the early 2000s. It was a Marvel Knights character. He's blonde. He's basically Marvel Superman. He gets his power from the sun and is impossible to stop. Now, when the character was first introduced, and again, sometime we'll probably do a geek history lesson on him. The character's currently dead in the Marvel Universe, which is why you haven't seen him for a while. He was created by Paul Jenkins, and when the character was created, they created this character as that he was a secret Stan Lee character that we never knew about. Stan Lee had created this character back in the 60s, and it just didn't get published, and there was this secret history. You found out that was all a lie. And that was part of the marketing, because the Sentry was this character that appeared in the characters' timelines in the 60s with them. So he was around when the Fantastic Four first appeared, when the Avengers first appeared, and he was with them. But when he fought his big villain, the Void, the Void was an enemy that was so powerful that any mention or memory of that villain brought that enemy back. So the only way to beat him, mind wipe everybody. And since the Sentry was so tied to the Void, he had to be mind wiped from existence as well. And so he became like a poor living schlub. So, but basically by this point, the Sentry was he had been revealed, but he's the nuclear weapon of the Marvel Universe.
And that's why it's a big deal that Skrull Jarvis kind of finds all this information on him.
Yes, exactly.
Because he could be unleashed later on.
Well, if whatever side the Sentry's on, that's the side that's going to win.
Yes. Toward the end of the run, Skrull Jarvis tries to get Maria Hill to surrender a helicarrier that is floating in the middle of the ocean. And the reason that I mentioned that it's floating in the middle of the ocean is because I wonder if this is a tie back to when Jarvis successfully defended the floating helicarrier from Dr. Doom.
You mean the Hydro base?
Yeah, that was floating in the ocean. And he is also the Skrull who steals Luke Cage and Jessica Jones' baby Danielle that may or may not have been replaced with a Skrull because they literally never address it again.
And if you want to know, like I said, we did a Jessica Jones Geek History lesson.
Not too long ago.
Go find that.
Yes. Jessica Jones discovers that Danielle has been captured because the real Edward Jarvis, who has been freed, doesn't have the baby. And they know that Jarvis took the baby, so it must have been Skrull Jarvis, logic. Jarvis later joins a support group for people who have been replaced by Skrulls during the Dark Reign storyline. That's when all this happens.
Dark Reign's storyline takes place right after Secret Invasion. That's where Norman Osborn has taken over S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yes. And Skrull Jarvis is eventually discovered and shot by Bullseye after baby Danielle is returned to her parents.
Aww.
And that's the last we'll have on Skrull Jarvis.
Aww. Skrull Jarvis.
So it's really handy that Jason just told us about Norman Osborn, because when he creates his personal Avengers team,
the Dark Avengers,
he goes to Jarvis and tells him that he should join, and Jarvis refuses to join. And Amadeus Cho and Hercules...
Who's Amadeus Cho?
Amadeus Cho is an Asian kid who's really, really smart.
Got it.
Who teams up with Hercules a lot.
And he's tied to the Hulk, and,
yes.
he thinks that the Hulk is innocent.
Yes, and he is currently a Hulk.
Yes, but let's not talk about it.
But basically, he's really smart. Okay, that's all you need to know. Him and Hercules start a team called the Mighty Avengers, and right after Norman Osborn asked Jarvis to join the Avengers, they ask him to join their Avengers because they have deduced through smarts that Jarvis is the only constant among all of the most successful Avengers teams, so they need Jarvis on their Avengers team. Jarvis says yes, and now he's a Mighty Avenger.
And I remember, as a sort of personal note, I think this is the best Jarvis storyline because he is an actual fully fledged member of the Avengers in the storyline. It's written by Dan Slott, and I remember I introduced you to this storyline.
You did. I actually really love this storyline. It has a lot of the Young Avengers characters in it too, so that's why I really like it.
It's basically their team led by Hank Pym, who was going by the Wasp at that time.
Which is a little weird, I must admit.
Well, because the Wasp had died in Secret Invasion. Them fighting Norman Osborn.
Yes. So then, not long after that, we get into this whole all-new Marvel Now kind of nonsense. And Jarvis kind of disappears again.
Well, the main team of Avengers are formed again after they beat Norman Osborn's thing. And Jarvis goes back to his old duties.
Yes, he does, because they've done this sort of reboot. And then he really doesn't do anything interesting until the Axis storyline.
Oh, what happens in Axis?
Well, the thing about Axis is
What is Axis?
Red Skull, with Professor X's brain, basically changes all the characters' like moral centers. Good guys become bad guys.
Gives them an inversion.
Bad guys become good
inversion.
guys. Jarvis is not influenced by the moral inversion.
Oh, yay.
So he teams up with the Hulk, who at this point, is also not morally inverted. And they are going to keep the Avengers from killing Tony Stark. That's like a big deal. Or from killing the Red Skull, I'm sorry. He's going to keep the Avengers from killing the Red Skull because the Red Skull's a good guy and the Avengers are now a bad guy.
Got it.
So Jarvis is knocked unconscious when the Hulk strikes him, when the Hulk suddenly becomes morally inverted while they're on this mission to protect the Red Skull.
Yeah, because I think he becomes Claw.
Yeah, which is Hulk spelled backwards, which I'm really sorry is like one of the stupidest things I've ever heard.
It's really dumb. I'm sorry.
Yeah. However, this is where we reveal that Jarvis is apparently Batman and had anticipated this happening, so he hid the Red Skull away and actually wound up protecting him from any wrongdoing, which he later has to justify to Captain America, who's not morally inverted anymore, but is still annoyed that he hid the Red Skull from them.
Can we just go back to him with lemon cakes fighting Dr. Doom?
I know, right?
Oh my God. All right.
So kind of like right now where we're at in Marvel continuity is that we're in the middle of Secret Wars, which is like never gonna end.
Yep. It'll end very soon.
And yeah.
Maybe.
So Jarvis meets up with a character named Rage and a character named Demolition Man at Avengers Mansion when Earth 616 and Earth 1610 share an incursion. That's kind of all you need to know. His status beyond Secret Wars is unknown, because that's what Secret Wars is. But if you, dear listeners, if you want to protect Jason and I
Wait a second. I want to make sure, because you just mentioned Demolition Man. Do you know who Demolition Man is?
I looked it up, and then I didn't think it was important, so I didn't make any notes on it.
Well,
so why don't you tell me who Demolition Man is?
Demolition Man is also known as D-Man.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, the character that I mentioned very early.
That's nice.
So that's why before we got anything, I wanted to talk about that. I was like, oh, we went full circle here.
All right. You ruined my segue, though.
It's all good. It's all good.
All right. So if you want to keep Jason and I out of the poorhouse and keep Geek History Lesson from falling on hard times like D-Man, what you want to do is you want to go over to patreon.com/Jawiin, Jawiin, and you want to donate to help keep the lights on here at the Mind University. Patreon.com/Jawiin, Jawiin. Help keep our lights on. So now, since we've talked all about Jarvis in the 616 universe, we're going to talk about a bunch of other Jarvises that you may not know, dear listeners, because there are a whole bunch of them.
Okay.
So the first one is Jarvis, the way you think it's spelled, but they're all capitalized and there's periods in between each letter. Do you know what that stands for?
Well, you're talking about the this is the movie AI, right?
Yes,
Oh, God. I don't know what the J would stand for. Keep going. I don't know.
It stands for just a rather very intelligent system.
That's stupid.
They really belabored
Wow.
the anagram there.
See, the J was their problem, too.
Yeah. He is the AI version that we know from the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yep. And he's been snuck into the Marvel comics as well.
Yes. Jarvis, the intelligence, is directly responsible in the comics for Pepper Potts putting on the rescue armor. And he is the intelligence inside that particular suit as well as being inside Iron Man's suit. Intelligence Jarvis eventually falls in love with Pepper, and she is forced to, quote, kill him as much as you can kill an AI.
That's the Matt Fraction Invincible Iron Man run.
Mm-hmm. Since he can no longer help her objectively and is beginning to endanger her and others around her. Tony Stark knows when Jarvis dies, and he is deeply affected by this in the comic books. So he also appears in the House of M Iron Man miniseries from 2005. House of M is when Scarlet Witch says no more mutants, and we kind of get to see all the Marvel characters stuck in these alternate reality / dream worlds. And Jarvis is an intelligence system inside the Iron Man suit there as well, predating Jarvis in the MCU by 3 years.
Wow.
So that is the House of M is the first time you see
Jarvis
operating system Jarvis.
Okay, so that's probably where they got it then.
Yes. It is anachronized, like it's J.A.R. whatever.
Yep.
In that issue, but the just a rather very intelligent system is from the movie.
Got it.
But so I just think it's interesting that we got that before even the movies came around. There's a really cool Marvel line called Marvel Noir that was coming out in like 2008, 2009.
Got it.
And in Iron Man Noir, Jarvis is Tony Stark's engineer and personal assistant. He's kind of like the Igor to Tony Stark's Victor Frankenstein. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the most active roles that you get to see him take in any Marvel incarnation, which I think is like, it's just really fascinating to see him be a more active than a reactive character. In the Ultimate Universe, which Jason alluded to at the beginning of this lesson, Jarvis is Tony Stark's personal butler, no longer his manservant. But he refuses to work for the Ultimates because he just wants to kind of look after Tony. He's also a lot more sarcastic and irreverent towards Tony than he is in the 616 universe. Like in the 616, he's very much, fatherly. I'm looking after you. Like here, he's doing it for a paycheck and because he can swear at his boss. Mm. When Tony gets into a serious relationship with Natasha Romanova in that universe, Jarvis and her come to blows a lot. They fight very fiercely. He's very, very suspicious of her.
He calls her trash.
Yes, he does. And this turns out to be well-founded because Natasha winds up shooting Jarvis in the head.
Yeah, she's a traitor.
Yep.
In the Ultimate Universe.
Yes. And Ultimate Jarvis' death is the main factor for Ultimate Tony Stark having a downward spiral into alcoholism, mirroring what happened in his original 616 kind of universe counterpart. Tony eventually goes on to have 3 more servants or assistants, kind of depending on who the character is, one who's even a girl, that are either named or nicknamed Jarvis throughout the rest of the Ultimates run.
No, they're not nicknamed. There's a specific scene where one of them...
No, one of them, it is a nickname that he calls them Jarvis, but it's not their name.
No. For all of them, they are not Jarvis. Their names are not Jarvis because the first one that he hires, there's a specific scene where Tony calls him Jarvis and the guy's like, my name's Michael. And he's like, no, I'm paying you this much money. I'm going to call you Jarvis.
But the girl, he hires a girl at one point and her last name is Jarvis.
Oh, okay, my bad.
And that's why I didn't
know about the girl.
So it's like named.
But I remember the scene where he's like, I'm paying you whatever I want.
Yeah.
I'm going to call you Jarvis.
I mean, to be fair, like by that point, Ultimates was like way off the rail.
Well, that's true.
But I think it's a really interesting detail that even though like Ultimate Tony and Ultimate Jarvis didn't have necessarily like the warm fuzzy relationship that we're used to them having in 616, that Jarvis still made that much of an impact on him that, yeah, because Ultimate Tony Stark's really crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's just like, that's what I'm calling you.
Got it.
Like, too bad. So that's the lesson on Edwin Jarvis.
Yay.
Let's move into recommended reading, shall we?
Sure. What's the recommended reading for Edwin Jarvis?
Well, my recommended reading is actually going to be some recommended viewing. Because for me, I think the best version of Jarvis that we have ever seen is the one portrayed by James D'Arcy in Agent Carter Season 1. Because I think even more than the comic books, you get to see the utility of that character. And that character is not necessarily well-trained, and he's not necessarily of a genius-level intellect, but he brings, to borrow a phrase, a very particular set of skills to the table that he's able to use to his advantage, and it's just really compelling watching. So I'm going to say Agent Carter, season 1.
Is that it?
Yeah.
I would say I was surprised you didn't pick Mighty Avengers. The first trade of that.
I think I've recommended that before, which is why I didn't want to do it again.
Jarvis is a very important part of that. I would also recommend Secret Invasion because it's really cool seeing Jarvis as the bad guy, which is really neat. And you know what? Just for the fun of it, Kurt Busiek's Avengers #1 volume, I think, is a great place if you're looking for. And you know, that's, again, in my opinion, the best run of Avengers storylines, and that's Jarvis as its classic butler.
It is. So that's kind of the cool thing about Jarvis is because he didn't really become a supporting character until recently, you can get a lot of different versions and incarnations of him in just a few books.
True. Yep.
I think it is now time for our discussion.
Yes, and in the discussion, we wanted to bring on our own manservant, if you will, onto this podcast. There's a friend of this podcast. He is what I would consider a Marvel expert. He is a writer, a producer, a director of so many things, and he is a host, writer, and founder of Geekscape.net, and also the host of the podcast. We're going to talk about Edwin Jarvis to Mr. Jonathan London. Thanks for joining us, John. We're ready to talk some Jarvis with you.
Yeah, I'm always ready to talk Jarvis.
So how do you see the character of Jarvis, or who is Jarvis to you?
I guess Jarvis to me is like the first, I think it's like the first time you read a character is usually what you think of that character for forever, right? Like that's your first impression of him. And for me, it's the 80s Avengers books. Mm-hmm. But he's obviously been in books almost 20 years prior when he came out as Iron Man's butler. He's Tony Stark's butler. And then when Tony Stark started the Avengers, he became
the Avengers
butler because the Stark mansion became Avengers mansion. And he's been a part of the team throughout pretty much every lineup. Mm-hmm. And Cap can't say that. Like Captain America can't say that. He wasn't a founding member.
No.
Iron Man can't say that. Thor can't say that. No Avenger can really say that except for Jarvis. Like Jarvis has been an Avenger longer than anybody else.
So you see Jarvis as a full founding member of the Avengers?
That's a tough one because the founding members are obviously like Wasp, Ant-Man.
Well, I guess I misspoke.
But Jarvis was there.
Yeah,
and Jarvis was there when they heated the ice off of Captain America. Like he was there.
It was Jarvis using the blowtorch.
And Jarvis has Jarvis has tried to defend the mansion several times. Yeah. You know, Jarvis has gotten his butt kicked a lot in trying to be part of the Avengers. And sometimes he's done it successfully. So, I think at this point, if Captain America is going to consider Jarvis an Avenger, I'll consider Jarvis an Avenger, but he's not a founding member. He was a support member, and now he is a card-carrying member of the Avengers. And that's Edwin Jarvis.
Edwin Jarvis.
Who's a human, British, elder gentleman. Not the one from the movies.
Yeah, not a computer virus.
Which is just a really very intelligent system.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like, come on, guys. You couldn't think of, okay.
So, Alfred versus Jarvis.
Alfred Pennyworth. Yeah.
Alfred Pennyworth of Batman fame. Who is the better butler?
Better butler, like who can make
more stuff.
Yeah, I would think that Jarvis is a better butler because he has to cover quite a few people, unless you think that the Bat family hangs out in Wayne Manor the entire time.
Sometimes they do.
I mean, Bruce Wayne might be the biggest baby we've ever known, though. Like he might be like, Alfred, brush my teeth. Alfred, draw my bath. Alfred, turn on the TV.
Yeah, or he can just have like the multitude of women that spend the night at the Wayne Manor and have yet to figure out his secret. But I think just based on the fact that not only does Jarvis have to cover a bigger personnel than Alfred, but he also has to deal with metahuman types. Like he has to deal with Thor.
He has to clean the bathroom after Thor uses it.
After Hulk uses it. Forget how Thor uses it. Like Thor's stuff probably gets sprinkly rainbowy and goes back across the Rainbow Bridge. Like Hulk totally leaves radioactive, gamma radiated dumps. And so, I mean, as a butler, I'm going to give it to Jarvis.
As an auxiliary team member.
I'm going to give it to Alfred.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to give it to Alfred because Alfred's gotten his ass kicked a few times, but he knows where everything is. He's an active support member. And obviously, Jarvis is a bit derivative of Alfred.
Yeah.
But the fight as a fighter, he's Royal Air Force. He's a boxer.
He was a spy.
Like Alfred,
actor.
Like Alfred has done some, or Jarvis. I'm thinking about Jarvis now. So Jarvis is a he's a hand-to-hand combatant. He's done some stuff. He's taken on Loki. He's taken on
who has on the Marvel Universe though?
Yeah,
who has?
Right. I'm a trickster. No, you're a cat. It's like Loki could be anything. I want to give it to. I'm going to give it to Alfred.
Yeah.
I mean, he is at the Bat computer. You don't see Jarvis being like, let me just pull the helicarrier over here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, he's not doing that. He's making tea. He's not. Yep. He's getting an email from like
if he knows
Nick
how to
Fury.
If he knows how to use email.
Okay, but I'm Marvel, and I come to you and I say, John, I need you to direct the next Marvel Avengers movie.
Yeah.
And I need you to put a live action actor as Alfred piloting the helicarrier.
Yeah.
Do you say yes, and who do you cast?
You mean Jarvis?
Yeah, Jarvis, whatever. They're all the same.
Guys, this is a really tough situation because I was telling Jason about a script I'm writing now, and it's basically
a butler flying a helicarrier.
Is it a butler flying a helicarrier?
No, it's. I thought of it when I watched. It's like spy, but it's like instead of a secretarial spy having to save James Bond, it's the butler having to save the super team. And I'm literally writing that. I'm literally writing that script right now, and I'm writing it with an actor in mind.
Do we need to cut this out so that nobody in our audience knows this?
No, I mean it's a really good idea, and again, like Alfred, like both Alfred and Jarvis have saved and defended their bases several times, and I have an actor in mind, and he's pretty perfect. But because it's the Marvel U. I'm not writing mine within the Marvel U because it's the Marvel U, and they skew younger, right? I'm going to go Simon Pegg.
Oh, interesting choice.
Yeah, I'm going to go Simon Pegg.
Wow.
And I've thought of Simon for like my script, but I'm not.
Wow, that's a good choice. So Simon Pegg is the live-action Jarvis. Did we just ignore James Darcy from Peggy Carter?
Well, James Darcy takes place in a 1940s, 1950s timeline.
Yeah, 1960s, yeah.
We're talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe in
contemporary one,
2016.
So there have been two Jarvises.
I mean, in the Ultimate Universe, there's like 6 Jarvises.
Yeah, just
in like the Marvel Universe, like there's Black Nick Fury, which is the kid of the original Nick Fury. And the original Nick Fury was had those like the Watcher on the wall for the Earth,
on the moon.
And you're sitting here going, "What is happening?" The Marvel Universe is crazy. But yeah, if you're going to contemporize the character, James Darcy, I think is perfect. I think Agent Carter, he's amazing. He's actually I mean, I love her.
She's great. Haley
She's
Atwell.
amazing. But her relationship with James Darcy's Jarvis is pretty amazing.
We're getting them switched.
It's hard. It's really
so
hard
similar.
to keep them together. But in the same way, like my Alfred is always the one with like the small mustache who has the platter and the gloves. And
the one who literally draws a bath.
Who literally draws the bath. Like that's always my Alfred. Like my Alfred is not Michael Caine. My Alfred is not. It's the guy who draws the bath. The tall, narrow guy.
When they cast Michael Caine, I remember originally in Batman Begins, I initially was against it because I was like, that's not Alfred. But then he convinced me in the movies. Like for that movie universe, I think he's a fine Alfred. But I agree with you.
And who played him earlier? Like Michael Paxton's dad?
Michael Gough.
Michael Gough.
Michael Gough.
Bill
Gough.
Gough. Yeah.
And then the weirdo guy in Batman 66. That guy's a weird guy.
Yeah, who would you cast as the Alfred you and I see?
Oh man,
Alan Rickman with buzzed hair.
I wouldn't.
Alan Rickman's a little old, I think, for that now.
Alfred's old.
Yeah, Alfred's old.
I know, but not that old.
I hope Alfred's drinking so much milk.
Oh wow, I don't know. I mean, maybe Colm Feore.
You don't think he's too young?
I mean, no, but
he's like in his 50s.
Let's skew it young, you know? I mean, I don't know.
And I do like the Batman versus Superman casting of Alfred.
I like Jeremy Irons as Alfred, yeah.
I mean, too bad he's obviously like Slade Wilson's butler, and Bruce Wayne's not even in the movie. I'm just kidding. Remember that?
Yeah, that
really bad theory where I was like, okay.
They're not going that
Whatever.
complicated, everybody out there.
It's like, people, please. They still need people to watch the movie. They still need people to not walk out of the movie scratching their heads.
Do you have any for yourself? Any favorite Jarvis moments, or like, do you generally like Jarvis, or is Jarvis just like a piece of set dressing for your Avengers stories?
No, I like Jarvis, and I've been researching Jarvis a lot in the last 2 weeks. But Avengers 59-60 is the one where he defends the mansion
Against the Masters of Evil?
No, the Master of Evil came later.
Okay.
And that's like a pretty major one because Mr. Hyde
Beats the crap out of him.
shit out of him. He loses like the
And
ability
Captain
to
America
see.
is forced to watch.
He makes Captain America watch. He like bounds and gags him and is like, "Hey, Cap." And I'm like, "This is Mr. Hyde. Like, Mr. Hyde's not great." And then Jarvis's character started doing some weird stuff during like Secret Invasion. He was actually one of the Skrulls.
Yeah.
Which is big, like when the Skrull ship opened up and you saw everybody like Mockingbird and stuff like come out of the Skrull ship, like Jarvis was there and you're like, oh my God, who was having sex with Aunt May this entire time? Because if anybody was thinking about the fact that Jarvis and Aunt May had an active relationship in Stark Tower, it was me. I was like, come on. And I'll be thinking, and for you fans, I will be thinking so much more about Aunt May in a fantasy sense now that like Marissa Tomei is playing her.
Yeah.
Like, that's a hot Aunt May. So, yeah, but I don't know. I would go with that Avengers 59-60 and probably that Masters of Evil break-in one because that was like the impetus for my script. It's like, oh, let's see if it all comes down to the butler.
Let's see if it all comes down to the butler.
Like, what would he do?
Nice.
I think it's fun. It's a cool idea. You know, he's the guy.
He's the guy.
He
doesn't just make Eggy in a basket.
Again, fans, through every revolving door of the Avengers, there's been Jarvis. You know, when Luke Cage.
That's your title right there. Well, there's been Jarvis.
when Luke Cage had to like make the Mighty Avengers,
yeah,
he got a Jarvis. He went to Jarvis. And then when the cinematic universe made the Jarvis robot, like AI, they kind of started putting that in the book, and it didn't go very long before Jarvis turned evil.
Yeah.
And Tony Stark had to be like, this is a mistake.
Now you
Friday. Tony Stark, you made a lot of mistakes. Jarvis really only quit when Tony Stark became an alcoholic.
For like half an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of those things. Maybe the writers leapt. Like it was like, oh, a writer takes over. Where's Jarvis? You didn't read the first issue. You didn't read the issue.
It doesn't matter.
No, but I want our Jarvis back.
Well, that works.
I think Simon Pegg would be a pretty kick-ass modern day Jarvis.
I think he would be a kick-ass modern day Jarvis, and
He's got the hairline for it.
You've convinced me on John, and I want to thank you so much for joining us on Geek History Lesson. Real quick, tell everybody out there where they can find you, follow you, and get any updates about anything you're working on.
At Jonathan London on Twitter, and then we post daily content on Geekscape.net.
Woo! Thanks so much for joining us, John.
Of course.
I don't think anyone could sum it up any better than Jonathan London. Guys, go follow him over on Twitter and give him some support. Really thanks to him. Really big thanks to him for coming on the podcast. Now we're going to move on into the teaching tweet, where our professor of our lesson gives you their thoughts about the character that we just taught you about in 140 characters or less.
Okay. Jarvis, : a really very vastly important servant.
Hashtag lemon cakes?
No, because it spells Jarvis.
Okay, because you did it. Oh.
I did an anagram.
I wonder why the very vastly. I was like, very vastly.
I mean, it's 2 V's, but I thought he deserved some adjectives because he's pretty cool.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Very cool lesson about Edwin Jarvis. Well, that's it. Thank you all so much for listening to this podcast. Just want to remind you, if you are interested in any of our recommended reading, you can go to where, Ashley?
You can go to www.geekhistorylesson.com/recommended reading,
Yes.
all lowercase.
And on there, you can find the pictures of all our recommended reading that we just recommended and clickable links to where you can buy them on Amazon. And every little book that you buy through that link brings a little bit back to the show, just a small little bit. help the show along.
Click the pictures.
Yeah, go download and subscribe to us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Stitcher, and leave a review if you want, because it helps other listeners find this podcast just like you. And if you want to suggest future lessons, like maybe the secret recipes of Aunt May and Jarvis, you can do that where, Ashley?
You can do that at geekhistorylesson.com. We have an open ask button. You can do that on facebook.com/geekhistorylesson.
You can find me on Twitter at Jawiin, Jawiin, and YouTube with the same spelling. And Ashley's on Twitter at Ashley V. Robinson. Go follow us. Tell us what you think about this lesson. Tell us if you think lemon cakes could actually beat Dr. Doom, because I'm fascinated about that. And also, don't forget, patreon.com/Jawiin. You can get a Geek History Lesson extra exclusive to Patreon for our $5 patrons. And we're going to talk about, I think, a bunch of butlerly, lemon cakey, Aunt May things over there.
Absolutely.
It's going to be a lot of fun. You get a lot of more Geek History Lesson for your lemon cake dollar. Well, that's it. I'm Jason Inman.
I am Ashley Victoria Robinson.
Professor Ashley, with your well-crafted English tone and your training from the Avengers and your kitchen cooking from England, please close out this podcast.
Class is dismissed before I burn my lemon cakes.